because it would still be ongoing if it was entirely up to me. So Gary Kern, he took part in it. Jim Nolte, Paul Gooch, John Lee, I don't know if he's still in here. But anyways, those guys, and with the help of Matt Shirtliff and Brian Grimm, I was able to get everything put together in an orderly fashion. And so I do want to highlight, it happens later on in the slideshow here. This travels the path of the guidance document that's free and available on our website. So all you go is to ngfa.org, go to the training or the issues tab, and then go down to safety, and you scroll about halfway through that page, and you're going to find about 15 safety tip sheets so far, and 2 or 3 industry notifications. It's got our 5-minute bin clip, and there's several videos on there that Jess did prior to me, as well as guidance documents that we put together. It's got the new walking working surface guidance document, and what you can do is between me and Sarah Gonzalez on staff there, when you guys call in with questions or updates, when you're reading through there and you find corrections and we prove that those corrections are to be true, we go back in there and we update it immediately, and then we re-upload it to the website. So this is version 5 of my PowerPoint of the guidance document. It started with about 70-something slides full of words, and now it's down to 50 with pictures. So you're welcome. I thank you for those in the room here that got me those pictures. So let's get on with it. This is way better when you interrupt me and ask questions. Okay, it is way better. And then I've got those subject matter experts in the room to help answer the really tough ones. So quick outline of what, better stay here. Quick outline of what we're going to be going over today. And a background here. So we're all aware of when this came and the shock that came with it. And then waiting on letters of instruction for the co-shows and waiting on letters of interpretation for us on some of the new verbiage. And so here's the background. I'm going to give high-level overviews of the ones with a lot of words. I don't want to insult your intelligence and read verbatim, but there's a lot of good info here that I could not cut any more fat off of it. So rolling stock. Under the Obama administration, as many of you know, we continued to be cited for not conducting a proper PPE hazard assessment and allowing workers on top of rolling stock. And one would think that when you're redoing the walking and working surface that you would include it, but it was not included. That means that the Miles memo is still in effect for us. Combustible dust. OSHA still considers and classifies combustible dust as a walking, it's a slip and trip hazard. So it's talked about in the preamble. They continue to interpret it as the combustible dust, as that surface hazard. Excess accumulation gives you the slips and trips. So what many of you know in the industry to be is the trifecta. If you have an excess of dust on your floor, you can be cited under 3 separate areas, the 272 and general duty and the walking working surface now. Yes. So the history of the Miles memo from 1996. Hey, Mr. Nolte, would you talk about the Miles memo from 1996?
Basically, what the Miles memo said is that fall protection was required when you were doing your loading, unloading, and it was contiguous to a structure or building to where fall protection was feasible. And therefore, that pretty much, it explained the fall protection requirements. But OSHA didn't really acknowledge the Miles memo at all, and they were citing for issues where, say, that you were out in a rail yard somewhere and there's nothing around. You can't feasibly install a fall protection system out there. They were still citing for failing to have fall protection. Well, the Miles memo said if we didn't have that rolling stock next to a building or contiguous to something where you could install fall protection, then fall protection wasn't required. So that's essentially what the Miles memo was all about. Well, that's probably going to depend on that area office's interpretation. It's very different, believe it or not, from state to state, depending on how that area office is instructed, or how their area director is instructing their compliance officers to cite that. A lot of it is being cited now, again, on doing the assessment piece. So, and that's where I think it falls under the new fall or walking working surfaces standard.
So my understanding is that, fall protection, not just to name a company, but fall protection services, or those rail fall protection, we've all seen them up and down the highways that are on the backside of elevators that are load out, and they've got several different designs now. Well, one of theirs is, so they've got mobile units, and so that you can pick it up and you can move it to where you need it. So that's going to have to go to your company and between them if it ever came to litigation. So quick summary of what we're going to dive into here. Compliance flexibility is provided with the new Subpart D. So there is some flexibility that's built in. Subpart I provides criteria on the proper use of the personal fall protection systems when used by the employer. And the appendix is going to provide examples of procedures and test methods used by PPE manufacturers. Under new rules, employers must set up a workplace, that prevents. So, hey, we got to provide a safe work environment. And then you get the baseline here. We got to provide working conditions free of the fall dangers, keep floors and area clean, PPE, guardrails. So this isn't new. Okay, so the timeline here, most of the rules became effective January 17th, 2017, 60 days after publication. You got to have your workers trained by May 17th, 2017. That time's passed. Workers trained on the equipment covered by the final rule. That time has passed. Inspecting and certifying permanent anchorages for rope descent systems. Okay. So is that done for any of those? So when you think about your facility, and we'll get into the nuances of that, inspecting and certifying a permanent anchorage point for rope descent systems. So we're going to talk about, hey, when do those have to be installed to begin with? And if you're beginning now, November 20th, 2017 was when it's required that those places start being engineered and certified. I put in a link here. I added that this morning because it was the first time that Jess and myself found a letter of interpretation or a letter of instruction to the COSHOs. And so as we were doing my year-end review, which was awesome, by the way, as we've all had good and bad, but when we were going through and looking at some of my projects that I've got going on right now, we were cruising through the OSHA website and went down to letters of interpretation. And we found one from November 18th, 2017. And so there's a link here. You guys are going to get these, all of these presentations you're going to have access to through Grain Journal. And you're going to want to basically go back and reference this one quite a bit, but you can dig into that letter right here, and you can find out what the COSHOs are going to be looking at when they come to your facility. And it's also going to tell you what you need to provide them. It's got a letter. Basically, there's instructions for you to follow when it comes to that anchor point. Installing personal fall arrest on ladder safety systems on new fixed ladders over 24 feet and on replacement ladders, ladder sections, including fixed ladders and outdoor advertising structures on and after November 19th, 18. Existing fixed ladders over 24 feet are equipped with cage well, personal fall arrest systems, or ladder safety systems. no later than November 19th, 2018. So as we approach that, if you've got those ladders that are over 24 feet, they need to have a cage on them for the time being. Having a ladder safety or personal fall arrest system installed on all fixed ladders over 24 feet by 2036. I'm not going to read all this. It's pretty small, though. With the revision of Subpart D, they've kind of reorganized the way it looks. And what they've done is they've reassigned some of the numbers. So if you're operating off of your memory, because that's what you do in your spare time is memorize where some of this stuff is found. If you are operating off of that, you need to go back in and study again, because the new Subpart D, you've got some new titles under old numbers. There's a lot of new definitions that they went in to clarify so that we could get everybody on the same page. There's a link to our website that takes you right to our guidance document over the walking working surface. There's a lot of them, so unless you want me to, I'll move on from that, and we can, if we've got a discrepancy on a term, we can talk it out. But there's too much. So rule of 24, that's something that I came up with because as I was going through this, I'm going to repeat that same phrase over and over and over. So when I say the rule of 24, everyone in the room is going to know that in the event that a ladder extends more than 24 feet or exposes a worker to a fall of more than 24 feet to a lower level. Okay? Everybody's tracking with me on that one, so later we got the rule of 24 down. So prior to the revision, fixed ladders were found in 1910.27. Now we have to go to 3 separate locations to put all the pieces together. Oftentimes, OSHA will issue a citation over something that is not necessarily addressed within one of their standards. And they can do that, and they can get away with it by referencing another nationally recognized organization such as ANSI standards. Those of you that are aware of those, you're gonna look in at some of these rules and you're gonna be like, hey, ANSI's been doing that for years. Well, OSHA's catching up. And so not only did they catch up, but they're using some of the same pictures and methodologies that ANSI's been doing for a while. So here's the 23, 28, and 29 broke down as far as the general requirements. All right, this is where we start to get a little fuzzy, okay? So if we need to stand up and do some jumping jacks or push-ups, I'm sure that I can lead us through that exercise. Fixed ladders extending more than 24 feet. That fall within the rule of 24 must adhere to the following before November 19th, 2018. It's equipped with personal fall arrest system or ladder safety system or cage or well. Okay, so we're all tracking with that already. New fixed ladders. Each fixed ladder installed on or after November 19th, 2018 must be equipped with a personal fall arrest system or that ladder safety system now. And so I guess in the legal world, they don't really like this note that we applied at the end, but the safety cages, they're not required anymore after that time frame. And you can use one, you can put it on there if that's something that provides you comfort or you think that that's going to provide more safety for your employee, you can put it on there all day as long as it doesn't interfere with the ladder safety system. Yes, sir?
The cable system, you're allowed to have a longer stretch of ladder now. I think when you use it, it's like 150 foot. And in the new OSHA requirement, when they do make reference to cages, they still limit that length to like a climb of 50 feet with offset. I didn't know if when the two are combined, if you can still do a straight run of 150, or if because you do have that cage, now you kind of fall back to the requirement of 50 feet. I may be jumping ahead a little bit, but when I saw cages mixing with the cable system, that just came to mind.
Yeah, so you're jumping ahead just a skosh, but that's all right. That's all right. So somebody jump in here if I'm off. So OSHA requirement under the new regulation is you can have a stretch of 150 foot straight before you're required to have a rest platform. Okay, so you can go, if for some reason you got a 300 foot elevator, at 150 foot, you have to have a rest platform. Okay, and you can use in conjunction, you can use that bird cage, we'll call it a cage well, bird cage well, same thing. You can use that in conjunction on a 150 foot ladder if you so want to, as long as it doesn't interfere with the personal fall arrest system. You gonna say something, Jim?
Well, that I think is one interpretation, and I just listened to a webinar that was put on a couple of weeks ago where the presenter was saying that if you are going to put cages on a ladder, you have to go to the 50-foot offset sections. That I think is one of the gray areas in the standard that we're going to need clarification from OSHA on that. And the reason they gave is if you've got, like Jim was saying, a 150-foot section with a cage on it, and somebody is 75, 80 feet up and they have a heart attack or something and they're just dangling there and hanging there, how are those rescue people going to be able to quickly access that person? Do you go in from the bottom, from the top? They have this whole cage to deal with. And so the way it was explained in the webinar, which kind of caught me off guard, was that was the reason OSHA limited. If you were going to put cages on new ladders after November of 2018, even with the fall protection systems, you could only go 50 feet, and you had to offset them. So you weren't able to run a cage 150 feet up. So that's a little new twist that's come up.
Brian, do you mind if I ask you a question? Okay. Or I said your name, so you're kind of like stuck with it. Hey, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, this little presentation that he was a part of on the webinar, that's kind of the first that I'm hearing it, which good discussion.
I mean, first of all, I know I wouldn't want to climb a 150-foot ladder without a rest platform.
Amen.
So I would do the right thing and put a rest platform. We're all going to get older at some point, so
right.
And I know what it feels like, so I would put the platforms. I am aware of the latchway system is designed to cable system on each section of ladder, but the latchway system is designed to navigate the ladder offsets. So knowing that there is a solution, I would go with offset ladder and a rest platform and put a cable system up in one continuous run. If you only have a 6-inch tether on the front of your D-ring to the cable, which is allowed, how would you climb a straight ladder and step off on the rest platform without unhooking from the cable?
Yeah,
So I question some technicalities on some of that. So by using the offset cable even, I think you probably would be able to do that.
So you referenced a latchway system. Is there a system out there that you've seen now?
I think MSA owns them now, but I know at Jeeps, a couple of the vendors had pictures of that system following the offsets. I tried to find it on their website, and as I've reported to MSA several times, their website sucks. So, but anyways, the vendors have pictures of that.
Okay, well, let's keep up the questions. That's good stuff. So replacing ladders on or after November 19th. When you're replacing a ladder, cage, or well, or any portion thereof is replaced, you have to update that ladder after November 19th, 2018. And that, the way it reads is that you have to update at least that specific section of ladder that you are doing any of the major work to. After November 18th, 2036, all fixed ladders got to be equipped with the personal fall arrest system, and the cages or wells are no longer required after that point. And then we get into this stuff here, the single and multiple section. The employer must ensure that personal fall arrest systems or ladder safety systems provide protection throughout the entire vertical distance of the ladder, including all ladder sections. And then we hit the rest platform at 150 feet. So I highlighted including all ladder sections because we're going to get into an interpretive dance a little bit later here. And so what you're getting is not Jim Seibert's interpretation. It's a bunch of professionals that are in the room right now. And when we get into that, there's not definitive answers, but it's based off some history and their knowledge in that specific area. So ladder sections with safety cages must ensure or offset from adjacent sections, nothing new. Must ensure ladders have landing platforms provided at a maximum interval of 50 feet now. The employer may use a cage or well in combination as long as it doesn't interfere with the operation of the system. Little caveat here. So the last that I heard from our OSHA contact is that there's over 20 letters of instruction waiting to be posted out for the co-shows and to hit their field manual for inspections. We have not seen those yet. We hit them up basically weekly. Me and Jess, we try to be a squeaky wheel that gets the grease. But what's going on up there in D.C. right now is nothing's going to move until they get the new elected person in there once they can clear. So fixed ladder, fall protection requirements. It must be equipped with personal fall arrest system or ladder safety cage. Oh man, this slide is terrible, right? So yeah, this is Jim though. This is Mr. Nolte. But I couldn't squeeze anything out of it because the analysis on this is pretty critical. Under the previous standard, safety cages or wells were required if a fixed ladder or fall to a lower level exceeded 20 feet. That's been increased to 24 feet, as we know. Ladders currently installed that extend in between 20 and 24 feet, or the rule of 24 there, with safety cages properly mounted that meet design criteria and were compliant with the previous standard. You don't need to take any action on these ladders at this time. They're in compliance. Personal fall arrest ladders or ladder safety systems, they don't need to be installed on these ladders at all. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, sir.
What I was told.
So me and Jim just talked about this.
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about here is that if you simply have a ladder that's in the 20 to 24 foot range and it has a safety cage on it, you can leave it. It's fine. And we're going to assume it's just from the ground up. It's just a single ladder run to the top of a small bin. Okay.
Right.
That ladder would be in compliance. But you are correct that when you do have offsets and those transition platforms, you are correct that if you read into these standards, it does require that the offset platforms have a self-closing swing gate, because you can do exactly what you said. You could fall through that lower ladder opening there. So that is a requirement in the new standard now. So on multiple sections, yeah, your platforms need the swing gates.
Think about this in the grain industry a lot is how it impacts us, but you go to wind turbines, and this rescue, that's new to me. The interior of a wind turbine has a ladder that goes upwards of 150 feet.
Right.
How do you rescue somebody out of that? It's the same as a ladder cage, so to speak.
The emergency ladder coming out of a man lift shaft.
Exactly. So I'm not really, I didn't listen to the webinar, but I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay.
You can call me out, but I don't know if I have a good answer.
Okay. So, So we're eating into our time here, and this is long. Are you guys finding some value in this open discussion here? Because I can. Okay. Because these are the hardest questions that I field, and I would rather not get through this PowerPoint than leave something unsaid here. So the previous conversation that Jim and I were having in the back there was talking about what constitutes a lower level. You know, the verbiage in here keeps referring back to throughout the vertical ascent of a ladder, right, including its offsets. So is OSHA treating each section of ladder as its own ladder? Because they say also including its offsets, the vertical path. So does that mean as soon as I step off the ground onto the ladder and my destination is the bin deck, is that one ladder? That's a question for the ages. Right now, I have an email response that says if an employer can prove that an employee is not going to fall farther than 24 feet to a lower level, which they do not give us a description on the lower level yet, and they can prove that that employee, the likelihood of them falling off of that lower level, which they do not give a size, if we can prove that that's not feasible, then that constitutes a lower level. So what does that mean for a ladder where we're going up and we've got offsets, right? Say we get 7-8 foot off the ground, and now we're in full enclosure of a bird cage. We get up and we're below 24 feet, and I step off through a swing gate onto a rest platform that we all know has to have a top, a mid, and a toe board on it, right? Or more. More is a good way to think about it. And then so from the time I leave that, I should be completely enclosed and protected. Even if I'm not in a bird cage, a lot of us are doing banding from the bottom of that bird cage to the rail so somebody doesn't slip off, right? We're doing that good stuff. But what are we absent at the bottom of a swing gate? We're absent the toe kick. Okay, so can you prove that an employee walking down that hits the ground and crumples up on maybe that little 15 by 15 inch rest platform doesn't go underneath the mid rail and continue to fall? So those are things that get my wheels spinning, especially when I get a response back from OSHA. When I get a response back that's in shades of gray, more than 50 shades of gray, when I get that, I don't pass that on to the to the industry because it's just too interpretive and it's not a letter yet. Yes, sir. So,
and interesting enough, that same webinar I listened to said that you cannot use a platform as a lower level. And that caught me totally off guard because we have that letter of interpretation into OSHA and they have not issued anything on that
right.
yet. So again, that caught me off guard. So there's a lot of, as Jim said, 50 shades of gray out there on the wording of this standard and how people are trying to interpret it and come up with it. So,
is there any way that you guys could not quote me on using 50 Shades of Gray? Okay. It's done. It's done. All right. Can't take it back. Can't take it back. And I think Mary's recording this audio, right? She hit play. That's a bummer. All right. Existing fixed ladders. Under the revised standard, existing installed before November, the rule of 24 there. Have landing platforms provided at minimum intervals of 50 feet. Previously, it was 30, right? Ensure ladders are offset from adjacent. Personal fall arrest systems or ladder safety systems installed and used in combination. So a lot of repeat stuff here, but we're in the analysis portion of OSHA's actual verbiage. Note by November 19th, 18, all existing fixed ladders that land within the rule of 24 have to have that, or a cage or a well after November 19th, 2018. So replacing existing ladders after November 19th. A personal fall arrest system or ladder safety system must be installed in at least that section of the ladder, cage or well where the replacement is located. A question that I got from the industry just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I had to send it off to Jim to walk me through it and spark my memory a little bit. But there's a caveat. There used to be a note that talked about clearance behind ladders. Okay, so what was under the old rule and grandfathered in at the time, if you replace something that has always had an obstruction behind it, that little note and offset's no longer there, right? You can have no obstruction behind the ladder. I'm seeing a lot of north-south, so somebody else caught that as well. So keep that in mind when you get to going. I mean, what does that mean for wind rings on a bin? How do you get around that stuff now? Ladders on or after, be equipped with personal fall arrest system. Fall arrest system or ladder safety must provide protection throughout the entire vertical distance, including all ladder sections. Over 150 fits, got to have that. Man, these too many words. Okay, so final deadline. Must be equipped with personal fall arrest systems on everything. Safety cages, no longer considered, we know that. The ladder landing platforms will need immediate attention, including platforms provided to assist employees in transitioning from one offset ladder section to another, as well as other access egress points. And then we get into some definitions here that OSHA recently changed. Definition of a platform, a walking working surface that is elevated above the surrounding area. That just makes me scratch my head. We call it a walking and working surface elevated above the surrounding area. So that constitutes a lower level? Or does it not? Any horizontal or vertical surface on or through which an employee walks, works, or gains access to work area. The employer must ensure each employee is protected from falling into a ladderway, floor hole, ladders, platforms. And so this is where you bring in your self-closing gates or your serpentine that limits them from falling into those spaces. The standard does not allow for any delayed or phased-in time period to come into compliance. All ladder landing platforms and other ladder access egress points that expose an employee to a fall of greater than 4 feet should be assessed and self-closing swing gates installed. So ladder inspections, I think me and Mr. Grimm, when we were working on a product together, we were both chuckling about this. So, you know, the old portable ladders used to have the ladder inspection that you had to track every now and then, and they had to fall within compliance and be all labeled and rivets in place, things of that nature. The new section doesn't separate out fixed ladders. And so does that mean that we're going to be filling out those reports for all fixed ladders? Every ladder at your facility. Well, that's kind of yet to be seen. We don't know how they're going to enforce that or if we're making it a bigger issue than what it is. The second sexiest part about what we're about to talk about, or about this presentation, is stairways. Okay, everybody, we good to go? We're past the 30-minute mark. Everybody's awake because I try to be funny, but the wife disagrees. So I try to add it in there to keep something spicy. General requirements here. You got to keep a stair tread to any overhead obstruction is at least 6 feet 8 inches or at least 6 feet 8 inches on the spiral staircases. Uniform risers. Do not think that we've got anything new here except for after Jan 17 is the ones that were installed before can be the 20 inches, and anything that's installed after, you have to create that space. This now bumps up to 22 inches after January 17th, 2017. Requirements, it's got to support 5 times normal anticipated live load, but never less than concentrated load of 1,000 pounds. Standard stairs, provide access from one walking surface to another. Winding stairways can be around tanks. You got as long as the diameter is greater is at least 5 foot. Spiral or ship stairs when you can demonstrate, and there's a lot of pictures out there, and I'm sure that a lot of you have ship stairs or the alternating tread stairs in your facility. You just have to be able to prove with the measurements that this is what I have to use here to get by. Do I have any engineers by trade in the room? Oh boy. Okay, so I don't have any cookies. But if I had a cookie, if one of you guys can find out, there is a measurement in the diagram to the lower left that's been pointed out 3 times to me now that's absolutely impossible to meet. If you can find it, I'll try to get you a cookie. Standard stairs installed between 30 and 50 degrees, maximum riser height of 9.5 inches, minimum tread depth, have minimum width of 22 inches between vertical barriers. You want me to leave that up for you engineers? Okay, we'll move on. Spiral stairs, minimum clear width of 26, maximum riser height of 9.5. So I'm going to kind of cruise through these because some of this stuff has not changed, and I just want to try to get through most of this. So ship stairs, kind of as we've already discussed, you got to prove it, and there's your dimensions. Alternating tread, kind of the same thing. I don't think that any of these things changed as well. These are a unique beast. Does anybody have alternating tread in their facility? I've seen it one time at Kansas State University. And you would have thought, I mean, it's a university. They could put in some normal steps. Employer must ensure each employee on a runway or similar walkway is protected from falling. If you can demonstrate that it's not feasible to have guardrails on both sides, so we saw a picture of that example today. I think it was Joel's first one of the day. He didn't have a guardrail on the side where he had, I don't know if it was a high roller, a drag, or a belt thing, but I remember my circle piles back from my Cargill days that we had these big, long conveyors that would go from the ground, 200 foot long up into the air, and you'd have a guardrail on one side because basically you're protected about 3.5 foot high on the other side by a conveyor. All you had to do was mind the gap of your walking tread and not have something like his measurement showed. You got an 8-inch gap there that's a leg breaker. At least 18 inches wide. Protection from dangerous equipment, and then the openings here. Ensure that each employee near an opening, including one with chute attached. All right, so onto the guardrails here. Must ensure guardrail systems meet the following. Top edge height, 42 inches. So on the guardrails, anybody that studied this, one of the biggest things that I get from the engineers and the bin manufacturers in our industry always asking me, okay, so is it 42 or is it 36 to 38? Because it's confusing. So is it 42 or is it 36 to 38? And what's the difference? It's both. Okay, so when would the measurement of 36 to 38 can serve 2 purposes, and what are they? Okay, it can be a handrail and a guardrail if it falls within 36 to 38 inches. If its sole purpose is for a guardrail, it's supposed to be 42. Guardrail systems got to be capable of withstanding without failure a force of at least 200 pounds applied in downward and outward direction with 2 inches of the top edge at any point along the top rail. So I saw a really funny picture as I was putting this together and adding pictures for your pleasure. There was a picture of an employee that they had really hunkered down trying to put 200 pounds of force outwardly on a handrail. So I didn't include that picture. I didn't want anybody to be no discrimination here or questioning, but that was comical. So thank you for the person that sent me that. You know who you are. Handrails not less than 30 inches as measured from the leading edge of the stairway tread to the top surface of the handrail. One of these things that I'll do on version 6 of this this PowerPoint as I continue to trim a lot of the wordy fat and get just down to try to get a better bullet comment. Is there's a lot of systems out there where people are doing offset handrails off of a guardrail system. And that's a good idea. You can use a 36 to 38, but when you want to put in your a standard stiff guardrail, you can put a handrail off of that same system, allowing for your hand distance in between the rail. But there's another kind of best idea or practice there that I'll include that. So surfaces, handrails and stair rail systems, they got to be smooth. This is kind of some old stuff. So when we're looking at the new walking working surface, you kind of got to take into consideration the measurements and the ladders, and those are our big takeaways. We can dive into dock boards and all sorts of things. I have to go with Paul Gooch sometime and learn about dock boards because I don't think I've ever even seen one. But the main takeaways for our grain industry at the elevator, the feed mill, is the guardrails and the handrails and ladders and such. So many of the items specifically with the handrails and the guardrails, the rules are the same. The distance from your hand in between the object and the handrail, and then keeping it free and clear from burrs and sharp edges to protect the employees. We're going to cruise here. So, into training requirements. So, it's been given a new title under the revision of Subpart D. The information contained in this standard is all new, and employers are now required to comply with these training requirements. The new standard requirements are as follows. Before an employee is exposed to a fall hazard, the employer must provide training for each employee who uses personal fall protection systems or who is required to be trained as specified elsewhere. So, I'm working on a piece right now, and it's about new hires, new employees, or onboarding, or even a loaned employee. Company I was with, we used to loan employees to other facilities often, and there needs to be a brief onboarding of that employee, even if it's an employee from your own company, because the overarching rules of your organization should be as uniform as possible. But what do you do when you go from one facility to the next? You introduce human error, and you got different leadership styles and things of that nature. So the onboarding process, and something that I went by, and it worked. When you have a seasonal employee or a brand new hire, they're anxious to get out the door. You've got day one stuff, right? You've got your day one high level, feed them with a fire hose, they watch 20 videos, and we send them out to work. I've seen that done. And then I've seen others take it to the opposite extreme, where you're not going to let them go outside for like 3 months. Well, that's not feasible. So you do your day one stuff, and then what you do is you give that person 2 or 3 specific jobs that they're allowed to do. And when they build that trust and they build that rapport with you, then you add on more. And as you add on to the next job, you train them on the next item that they could possibly encounter with that job. So typically I'd get my seasonal employees during harvest. Well, they're going to dump trucks. They're just going to stand there at the pit, and some facilities allowed them to open the bottom gate, others don't. We did not. So he's standing there, he's going to be pushing a broom, he's going to be scooping excess grain. So what am I going to cover? I'm going to cover good posture. I'm going to cover ergonomics, and I'm going to physically show him a good way to push the broom and shovel, and how to shovel properly. And that seems really, really simple, right? That should be day one stuff. Every one of us has had a grain scoop in our hands. But I also had a recordable injury from a person scooping grain that had worked for me for 4 years, and you'd think that they would know better. So this, to me, kind of falls right in there. Fall hazards, are we going to want to put somebody in a harness and allow them to just get right after it after a week? Case-by-case basis, maybe. Case-by-case basis. So take the time. That person's, their life and their what they can do with their body is important, not just to you as their employer. So we got to train them on, they got to be trained by a trained and qualified person. I'll leave that up to you. Who says somebody's qualified, that's your call. Must train each employee in at least following topics: the nature of fall hazards in the work area and how to recognize them. Procedures to be followed to minimize those hazards. The correct procedures for installing, inspecting, operating, maintaining, disassembling the personal fall protection system that the employee uses. That's, to me, and I'm not managing facilities anymore, but to me, that's kind of a big one, right? So now we have new equipment. Now my fall protection harness has a ring on the front of it, and I'm not used to having a ring on the front of my stuff. And so now we've got extra pieces of equipment. We've got these anchored, engineered rope grab devices or cable systems, and the operation and the cleaning and the maintenance and the inspection of those is going to be new training for almost everybody at the facility. And the correct use of that personal fall protection system and that everything that goes with that. On or before May 17th, the employer must train each proper care, inspection, storage covered by the subpart by an employee to use the equipment, who uses a dock board to properly place and secure it to prevent unintentional movement, uses a rope descent system and a proper rigging in the use of equipments in according with that, and trained who uses a designated area in the proper setup and use of the area. And so when do you identify for your employees when is the right time for retraining? So we've had some examples today, right? We've had, hey, if we've had a near miss or we've logged something on our behavioral-based safety program, when something like that comes about, or you observe something and you go and intervene and you make a safety contact, that doesn't mean you have to take them through 100 slides again and start all over. But what it means is you should address it at the time and talk about, what happens if you miss that part of that step again, or you make that bad decision again. So that's up to you to recognize when they need to be retrained. Other examples of when retraining is necessary. You could. You very well could. So let's go on to what Matt was talking about. So would you need to document it? And if you're documenting it, what is your purpose behind documenting it? So that may be a culture thing. So if employees would find out that, hey, I left the broom laying in the walkway, and the boss saw me, and I'm getting written up for it. Personally, I've made mistakes, and I've done it both ways. And it depends on what was my purpose, or what was my overall intent or the end state of me writing it up. Well, I had a purpose and an end state in mind, because that employee, I'd identified as that person doesn't make safe decisions, and they're being lazy. And this is the first step in a long line of getting that person gone. And on the other ones where, hey, it's an honest mistake, or they had it put on the wall right, but it fell off, that's just a different situation. So my first question of what would be some other situations, I thought you were going to raise your hand for me there. Okay, I'll just answer. Hey, so we got a process, we have a process change, or we've added a new piece of machinery, or we've gone ahead and gone crazy and started replacing some ladders. So anytime that you have a change in the workplace that requires those employees to do something different, having the discussion about, hey, you guys, you see this brand new scalper we got here? It added an outside ladder. We got 4 sections. Has anybody looked at it? Anybody climbed that ladder yet? Was everything put together right? Did anybody notice any sharp edges as they walked around the scalper on the scalper deck? It's anytime you recognize an opportunity to address things, you got to take it, and that's a prime opportunity to do so. Changes in the type of fall protection systems. I've never hooked up to one of these cables. Make a healthy bet that a lot of your employees haven't either. Training's going to happen there. Never had a harness with the D-ring on the front. I'm about to have one. What other equipment does that mean that I'm going to have now that I got this system? Almost feels like I'm going to be wearing this all day. So it might be a good idea to have Miller or DV-Sal or any of the other 100 companies that make these harnesses come out and help us make a selection for the person that's a comfortable item. I don't know, just thinking outside of the box here. Also, you got the inadequacy in the affected employee's knowledge or use of fall protection systems. The employer must provide information and training to each employee in a manner that the employee understands. So don't let a language barrier be a barrier. Google Translate is awesome. So I'm in the U.S. Army. I'm a National Guard guy, and we have a state partnership with the Czech Republic. So they sent me 20 Czech Republic soldiers from their SF group last summer. We were down in San Antonio, and I could not understand one word any of them were saying. None of them spoke English. And so I'm like, okay, you don't speak any English. We don't speak your language. This is going to be terrible. Well, they taught me about Google Translate. They pull up their phone and they're slinging it at me. I mean, communication's slow, but slow communication, better than no communication. So make sure that you, there's so much stuff that's in different languages that you can get right now, and that's one thing. There's an additional tasking for me. They told me to figure out how to get all of our stuff translated into Spanish. I'll work on that. So, yes, sir. Yeah, so me and Jim both went. So, reading through, I did not see anywhere in the Subpart D where it went into like annual training or biannual training requirements. Now, that's just me and my reading. I didn't find it. Yeah. Which, yeah, fall protection's one of them that you ring that bell every single year. Would be my recommendation, if not more, if you got the time to do it.
Unless they might try to go 272 route and cite it under annual training there.
No, that's a good
You'd
point.
have to look at that.
There's a lot of variables in it, and I'm sorry if I'm taking a little bit of time here, but the filing system that we used, that I used, is we had it online, and when it came down for me to have to do a retraining, one is I would go in and I would put it into our, we used the DECRA system, that's the one that I'm comfortable with explaining. It was RCI at the time. We used that system, and I would go back in and I would do a program review, and I would basically go through the program myself, say, I'm retraining this individual, this is why. I'd print that out. You know, we'd go through the program together or just highlight the portion that they weren't getting right. Then boom, I put that in the training file of that employee. And so on a retraining like that, I think that's an entirely different situation opposed to, hey, we're talking to somebody about a safety situation. That didn't make sense. When that employee may feel like they are going to be reprimanded for bringing safety or making a mistake, I think that's where we have to walk gently, because we want those things brought forward and be able to have a really good, candid conversation. But retraining on a SIF thing or a life critical, I think those are the ones, money in the bank, you document it and put it away. So these are just, I've had this up here for a while. Maybe you guys have read through it, maybe you haven't. I just have a list of, I got 5 minutes, right on, perfect. So hopefully we've handled most of the questions, so we can just keep rolling. Who's qualified to certify the anchor points? What is a prompt rescue by definition? So hopefully you guys have gotten through that. Let me know if you want me to stay here for a few minutes. Okay, my understanding, and the last I checked, is it is 100% still there. And that ladder, when OSHA shows up on your site and they talk to your employees, hey, when do you guys use that ladder? I shimmied up it last week. I needed to get to that end. They got you. So that ladder is for emergency personnel only, was my understanding, was emergency response personnel. That is their ladder to use, and not necessarily for us. Jim, you save me here if I'm wrong.
Well, the standard addresses that, and ladders for emergency egress are exempted from the standard, whether it's
Okay.
employees that have to use
Yeah.
it or emergency personnel.
Okay. And I'll own it. So it's for emergency egress of our personnel as well, but it's not your everyday ladder. Did I save myself, Joe? Okay, we've kind of already hit on this question, Aba, what type of repair? And this kind of goes into, so you got one rung that's bad on a ladder. Is that a major repair? Do you have to get that entire ladder? What about replacing a bolt, or, reaffixing that to the side of a bin? If you're a bolt on, or if you're a weld on, is fixing that, is that a major change to a ladder that would constitute bringing that whole ladder or ladder section up to code? Yeah, that's a kind of where I was thinking there, but that's a good observation. Adding a swing gate, could be on the landing. I don't know. I think it almost would depend on how you affix that swing gate, on whether or not you're modifying a ladder. So, Jim is going to save me here. Thank you
Well,
guys.
I saw that now it's your turn, so I thought it was
Now
their
it's your
turn to continue with
Yeah,
questions.
okay.
I thought that was a good lead-in. So,
Good deal. All right. Any questions?
any more questions?
That's interesting, because one thing I've always thought of is we have to use the toe boards, right, on anything that you could knock something off to somebody underneath. And I've always questioned, well, we got all these platforms now that are up, but there's no toe board. We just have the top and the mid rail, the traditional swing gate. So as I go up on this sectional ladder, is that a requirement of having a toe board, or having now it's a rectangle instead of just the top? I got a whole system that I swing through. Yeah.
That'd be a trip hazard.
Well, not if it's one piece, is what I'm saying. If you make
Oh,
you make it one piece swing gate. So if you were to completely enclose a ladder, you completely enclose that ladder to where you cannot roll off an exposed side.
It'll comply with the standard. Right.
Right.
One thing that our company's done is we did, my team, my engineering team, we're doing, as our specs, doing that extension of the ladder cage down to the guardrail. And I actually had that in my slides, and I forgot to point it out, so I wanted to mention that. And then also some of the manufacturers for the different towers and trusses, a lot of them, as you're going down the stairs, they have the guardrail, handrail shared. And as you turn a corner, it's just that section. They always have those ends of the tubes open. If you're going down there real quick, or you're just, whipping around that staircase and you're going, you can catch your thumb or finger, something like that, in that as you're going around and making that turn. One thing that we do for that is we add in just rubber caps, but make sure that they can still have like a weep hole, so you're not getting water in there and freezing it and then splitting the tubes. So that's another thing that we do. And then maybe consider, like on a bin, going with a wraparound stair. I think at one point I checked with one of the bin manufacturers, and don't quote me, but it was maybe $4 or $5 grand more on a 105 bin. I do that every day just to have that safety and make sure that we're kosher with any ladders that you might be putting in. And then I think there's allowed 3 inches of deflection with the guardrail when you design that for that 200-pound load. However, you fall into that guardrail and it moves 3 inches, you're more likely to just flip right over it if you really trip into it. So check the design of what people are doing with that and make sure it isn't that flexible. So just a couple items I thought I'd share real quick.
Thank Jim for his presentation today. It was a difficult topic to talk about, so good job.
Yeah. Hey, thank you guys. I mean, the value's in the discussion. And so what we did right there, everybody's got a lot of the same stuff. So we're going to get it figured out probably after OSHA really, comes in and starts dropping the hammer. But
Yeah. Yep. And now we have